Hello, welcome to the Myth-Busting Neurodiverse Relationships podcast. I'm Natalie Roberts and I'm here with my co-host, Heather Parks. We've both been in our neurodiverse relationships and families for more than 25 years. We met 10 years ago when we were feeling really desperate and trying to solve a lot of issues in our relationship and our families. We've been journeying since then. We've found many more positive and hopeful ways to solve, resolve, repair, reconnect in those relationships and in our families, in our lives. And we now co-host also Loving Difference online, giving hope and a way forward for neurodiverse relationships. In this podcast, though, we're busting the myths about neurodiverse relationships, which we had when we started this journey, that we've realised aren't true, and that actually were preventing us from recovering and having the relationships with our partners and children that we wanted. So we want to dispel these myths and bring you hope that absolutely things can change. So whether you're out and about or comfy with a cuppa, let's dive into our next conversation. See you there.
Hello and welcome to the Myth-Busting Neurodiverse Relationships podcast. I'm Heather Parks. I've been navigating differences in my relationship and family for 25 years, along with my husband Phil and our 4 children. For much of this time, neurodiversity was unknown and there were challenges and struggles for all of us. And since journeying to recovery, I have been passionate about helping others to flourish in their neurodiverse families. First as a family support worker and SEND advocate, and now as an accredited coach. It's beautiful work, and I can't wait to share some of our discoveries with you here today.
Hi, I'm Natalie Roberts. I've been in a neurodiverse relationship and family with my husband Pete for 25 years. We discovered neurodiversity was a part of our story in 2014 when we were really struggling as a couple and family. Now we're thriving and enjoying life in ways I couldn't have imagined back then. I'm also an accredited coach, supporting individuals and couples in neurodiverse relationships to reverse the impact of unknown neurodiversity and thrive in a relationship and a life that they dream of. Together, Heather and I host Revival Retreat, the online journey for a flourishing life in your neurodiverse relationship, with a map, tools, and all the support you need to recover and be you in your relationship and your life. And you can find out more about that at lovingdifference.net.
Finally, before we dive in to bust the next myth, would you like to join us live for the next podcast? We record some of our podcast episodes live in Loving Difference. So if you'd like exclusive early access and the opportunity to share your views and ask questions, join us in Loving Difference, the home of understanding, support, healing and solutions for neurodiverse relationships. Membership is free. Just head over to lovingdifference.net. In this podcast, we're busting myths about neurodiverse relationships, which we had when we started this journey, that we've realised aren't true and that were preventing us from recovering and having the relationships with our partners and children that we wanted. And we want to dispel these myths and bring you the hope that absolutely things can change.
In today's episode, we're busting the myth that your partner can't meet your needs. So you'll need to leave the relationship to recover yourself and thrive. So whether you're out and about or comfy with a cuppa, let's dive into our next conversation. And to begin with, there's a neurodiversity narrative that keeps this myth alive. And it takes us back to the very beginning of our journeys together in 2014, when we were reading and learning lots about the new land of neurodiversity that we hadn't even realized we were in. And the neurodiversity narrative in this myth is the idea that your partner's too different or incapable of meeting your needs.
Yes, so true. We believed the professionals and books that told us this. They told us that we were too different, that our needs are too different, or our needs are too much, that our partners can't do it. They can't meet your needs, that the relationship won't work. You'll need to decide whether to like it, lump it, or leave it. It won't ever be what you need and always wanted. We heard and read that you're experiencing Cassandra syndrome. because your needs aren't being met. And that's what we believed. They can't be met by your partner, and leaving is the only way to get better. And there are a few things you can do to help with the symptoms, like self-care, boundaries, and medication, but that's the best there is if you choose to stay. Overall, the implication was that staying would be saying no to the happiness and connection that we'd been striving for and hoping for many years already. Staying would be resigning ourselves to our needs never being met, living a separate life in the relationship, being alone together, parenting alone, with no improvement to intimacy or connection. And the implication was that leaving is your only chance to recover. You have to leave the environment to feel better and have a different experience. Thriving, flourishing individually, together in the relationship, or as a whole family unit, just wasn't something we heard was going to be possible.
Yeah, I remember, Heather, it was just, I think it was all that information, maybe this myth most of all, that sent me into the just worse. I just felt so much worse for everything, having read so much for months, held on to as much hope as I possibly could. And hearing those kinds of things, I think that's what I can remember Christmas 2014 was just my lowest point, where I just, I moved very quickly into a sort of real depressive episode and period. I just felt like I was in a massive hole. A lot of anxiety, I wasn't sleeping. I just felt really hopeless about everything, about the future, about my kids, and just really felt powerless. I suddenly felt totally unable to do anything. And I know now I'm the fixer. I want things to get better. I want to find the ways through something. And it just felt like people were telling me, we haven't really got much to offer you. And it just felt really powerless. And bizarrely, we've also heard a version of this myth for other combinations of neurodiverse relationships now. So we heard you'd need to be the same neurotype. We were told numerous times, I even went to conferences with quite well-known people talking about the idea that both people need to be autistic for your relationship to work, that works much better. Different neurotypes can't work. Autistic people together all works out fine. I know from working as a coach now, that's really just not the case, because I work with all versions of couples. We've also since heard someone told you're both autistic, so your relationship won't work. So it's a minefield for people, and I think ultimately we believe professionals, we believe what we're reading. A lot of these people have been around a long time, and but it was really tough, I think. So since 2014, you and I have also journeyed with our own neurotypes and who we are, our own identities. And certainly we're not really using the common ASNT combination now. So where does that leave all the theories or us? It's very confusing, I think. So in Loving Difference, members are in many combinations of neurodiverse relationships: married, not married, gay, straight, young, old, knew about neurodiversity, didn't know about it, different combinations of neurotypes, and they're all struggling with lots of the same things. So there's a number of stereotypes, a number of generalizations and myths, I think, that we're here to bust today. We're still hearing from people who get in touch and have been told this apparent truth, this myth that we're talking about, and they're very distressed by the outlook that they're given by other people. So something is missing from the theories that have created the myths that are as alive today as they were for us back in 2014. A lot of time has passed since then, and yet we hear from people that are hearing and believing and therefore have the same outlook and potentially making some choices about that based on that truth. And I think that concerns me a lot when we're hearing that.
Absolutely, and me too. And it feels like, I shared that real pit that we got into soon after kind of being really receiving these kinds of messages, and the damage that could have done, and the choices that we could have made, without knowing what we know now, is what we want to prevent other people from doing. We want them to hear something different, to have some new perspectives. And And we kind of, what we worked out, wasn't it, as we traveled together, that there's some other things that really add to fueling this myth. So it's worth just having a little explore of some of those, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
let's go.
yeah, I think the first one, where there's a lot of cultural narratives and unconscious expectations that we have that we've just kind of never really challenged in ourselves. So one of them, one that's really important, I think, is that your partner will or is supposed to meet all our needs. I mean, where did that come from? I mean, that comes from, you know, what does a partner mean to us? I mean, that comes from stories and fairy tales and movies, and it makes our expectations so high that we're just going to meet this one person and they're going to fulfill everything that we need. And that can kind of also fuel that kind of apathy, I think, that we don't therefore need to be responsible for any of our own needs anymore, because we've got this magic other person that's just going to come in and do all that for us. And I think the other one there, you know, talking about cultural narratives, is that kind of really strong message we get that we have to think about others before ourselves. And by putting other people's needs before our own needs, this can really lead to sort of low self-worth and a sort of abandoning of our needs, or putting them right down at the bottom of the list. And that's harmful too. And I think, so the next one I'd like to just mention is that the narrative of need meeting in our childhood and with our primary caregivers, and how this translated over into our adult relationships. So depending on your experience, that could sound like one or a combination of my needs are your responsibility, your needs are my responsibility. So that may have been true to a certain extent when we were children. We may have felt that our parents and caregivers were responsible for certainly some of our basic needs. Obviously that happens, but actually as we grow up and enter into our own relationships, we actually can take over a lot of that ourselves. So I think if you believe any or all of these narratives, these neurodiversity narratives, these cultural narratives, you know, how meeting worked even growing up, you know, you can start to see why you'd believe that you'd have to leave the relationship to meet your needs, or that if you stay, your needs can't be met and won't be met forever. I mean, we just need better stories, don't we? And we need more truth than this, so that we can have more hope and that we can have a happy and healthy, connected life with our loved ones, and that this is possible.
Absolutely. And so let's move on and maybe explore then some of what's actually going on that we realize that the myth is overlooking and really invalidating, and I think which really invites our attention. Us bringing our attention to those things has massively helped us to have some different ways of seeing it, and then some different ways of living and moving through it and in it. And I think that with these things known and understood, then more connection and need meeting for everyone is just totally possible. So we have quite a long list. I know we've thought about all sorts of things that we realized was going on under here. So we thought we'd just share some of those with you. I mean, the first one, I guess, and maybe, I don't know if it's the biggest, but just the fact that for a lot of us, by the time we realize we're in a neurodiverse relationship, probably everybody in it is overwhelmed, overloaded, in some sense in defense mode, and unable to meet, or maybe are over meeting needs because of what's been going on, maybe as for their whole life or inside of the relationship. I think that was certainly the case for us, that
absolutely,
it became
huge
with more awareness how certainly Pete has spent his whole life in overload of all different information and experience, and that we were both in a version of our defensive states in the end. And we talk about those a lot in Loving Difference, for us all to understand what that is. I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that, Heather, because it's certainly your jam.
I mean, it's a really big one, because a lot of this is really subconscious. It's, you know, we don't have the awareness. We've developed these kind of defensive states early on, during life, even maybe within the relationship, because it served some kind of purpose, you know, but actually it necessitates a kind of narrowing of a focus. We become, because it's a kind of survival instinct, we're doing it to kind of prevent ourselves from harm or to try and reduce any hurt that we're experiencing. But that in itself doesn't lend itself to being in relationship very well, because it's a very self kind of contained state to be in. It's very difficult to see other perspectives, or, you know, it was a real shock to me, because I thought I was like some kind of saint in this relationship. You know, I was so busy. I was doing this over meeting of needs, pleasing.
Our needs right at the bottom, you know.
Yeah, with my needs right at the bottom. And I know I felt that this was a self-sacrificing, loving, giving, you know, so there was none of this was my fault, because I was doing all this stuff. But actually, I wasn't in that. I wasn't seeing at all what I was doing, or the potential harm that was causing, because actually it's not a great thing for everybody if you're doing that. So yeah, these things, this defensive state, that they are, it's not that they aren't useful. It's just that when you're in relationship, it's not great for interacting, is it? It's not good for that, especially for that intimacy that you're wanting and craving. It just doesn't help.
Yeah. What else from our little list? Which one do you want to pick next?
Well, I think very related to that, to me, is safety. You know, we talk about this thing as safety, and that's a really nervous system thing. To feel safe, you know, our nervous systems have to be able to pick up clues of safety, and that's very related to the defensive mode thing, because actually our nervous systems become quite biased into looking for and predicting danger or some kind of frustration, or we get a negativity bias, don't we? And we start giving all our attention onto everything that's going wrong. There's a lot of perhaps emotional lack of safety in emotion, and also in communication. So these things are definitely. Really tricky, those things. So that's really important.
I think that isn't something that we would maybe typically associate even the word safety with communication, but I think certainly that was big deal for us in our relationship and family, around how safe people felt, or how threatening communication was.
A bit of reactivity
when we would be saying no, it's totally, I'm a safe person for communication, but it's not about you, it's as much about where somebody else is at with their how they are with these things, you know. So a lot of things going on with that, for sure. I think one of the things, the other things that I think is really important is what your different love languages are, or just that you have different needs and preferences, and that maybe we're again expecting or hoping or thinking our partner will just know these things. And often I can remember asking clients in the past to say, well, how would you need or prefer your partner to do that for you? And they actually don't really have an answer sometimes. And then I said, okay, and so how would your partner know then? And I think that's sometimes where it starts challenging the internal stories. So I think that is another thing that for us just will have created a lot of confusion, because our needs and preferences and our love languages, how we feel and express love, is different. Or even if some things around that are the same, you could need it to look different. So that it's just the amount of difference. We talk about the difference seesaw, don't we? Big differences. And I think the confusion for us for 15 years was just we hadn't known or realized how different these things were. Lots of masking, lots of trying to fit in going on. So it was just really complicated.
I just
that has an impact on ability to meet needs and capacity to meet needs. Not just in both directions. We're talking about all of this in both directions.
Absolutely, both directions. I mean, one of the things I didn't understand was that people can't actually read your mind, and you do have to communicate your needs and how you'd like these things to happen. And that again goes back to that culture expectation of kind of having your perfect partner who's there to meet every woman's desire and to know that. And also that thing about love languages is, of course, we miss, again, a bit like the safety, we miss the clues that they are expressing love, because we don't see that what they've done over there is that way of expressing it. Sometimes it's because that's the way they would expect it to be, so they're not receiving it in. So it just becomes quite messy, and it's really helpful to unpick that, isn't it, and get a better understanding of what your needs and preferences are, and of what your partner's needs and expectations are, and then it can be so much more, I don't know, you can just start noticing it much more, can't you, bringing yourself attention to the things that are going well. I was going to say something about the fact that, that's the other one, what we talked about the myth going down, we stick our needs right down at the bottom, and we think of ourselves as, like I said, being really self-sacrificing and amazing to do that, because we're giving and giving and giving, but actually abandoning our needs, usually, I mean, for me, that meant that I was not the person that I was when I joined the relationship. I became a shadow of my former self. The things that were appealing about me and my adventurousness and my sparkliness, that had all gone. So actually, I really recognized that I was also more reactive and much less patient, and
your capacity has got used up.
My capacity is gone, because I hadn't been looking after myself, I hadn't been meeting my own needs or making sure they were met in whatever ways. So I kind of call
that like over accommodating fatigue. It is that in the over accommodating, or the over meeting of needs beyond what we have capacity for, there is then a fatigue and an emptiness, and we're not doing it from energy or capacity we have. But we feel like we have to keep going, and I think selfless, don't sometimes need to remember that does mean selfless. So there is less self, and I think there's a place for it, but for certainly for those of us whose defensive state is more of a over accommodate or meet needs, please, it can be harmful, self-harm.
It is starting to be recognised, isn't it? And in a kind of sort of carer's burnout.
We need to be very careful.
We do need to be careful with that. And the problem is that as you said, when we're not giving from that capacity, we're giving from scarcity, and that usually ends up fueling resentment or frustration, or we can't just keep doing that, because we get exhausted, don't we? So that's really a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think one of the other things I was going to pick up from our list was this an assumption that we also heard that was sort of inside of this, I think, around an assumption that one neurotype can and should do more need meeting than the other. There's even been some percentages or amounts that typically neurotypical, the idea that a neurotypical person can accommodate more, or should accommodate more, or do more to meet the needs of their partner. And again, this was something that I think for us actually was quite dangerous rhetoric, we could say. For me, I think it's quite dangerous because it's almost fuel to my tendency, or my protective mechanism myself, to over meet, and actually I needed people to be supporting me and helping me to understand where my capacity for need meeting also has a limit, perhaps, or a place that something might be beyond what I can do. Certainly Pete and I, when we will talk about it in the next episode, but certainly realizing and having situations where it might become okay to say, I can't meet that need, and he can't meet this need, and those things being okay. But I think there's also sort of an assumption, I think, inside of that the neurotype that's often the neurodivergent neurotype, they're saying can't meet as many needs, so they can just do 30%. But again, I don't think that's helpful for anyone to be hearing that there has to be more from one person than another. And also, I think it also devalues or misses out the fact that I think a lot of masking is actually trying to accommodate needs. It's trying to fit in. And in our relationship, I think otherwise the assumption is, I was doing 70% of a meeting needs and he's only doing 30, when actually what he's doing in life just to be showing up and do everything with the capacity he has is all probably way more than I'm doing anyway. So the way these things are talked about, I think, misses a lot of the lived reality for people. Sometimes it feels very easy for it to have got talked about in a book or research or something, and sometimes I just feel something maybe is missing. Don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think it's so true, isn't it? Because actually this comes down to this thing about capacity is so important, isn't it? If you've got a partner who's for example trying to hold down a full-time job, that in itself may leave very little capacity to do anything else. And so actually if you're and then we can forget as well that perhaps we're benefiting from that, and so actually we do need to then think about how that's impacting them, and maybe that we need to be looking. Sometimes we can fall into quite stereotypical. I know I had no intention of being kind of in that stereotypical kind of relationship, but it kind of just happened once I'd had children and a bit of time off, and so all of these things need to be taken into account, and the effort that goes in, as opposed to how much actual need making is going on, maybe that needs to be looked at a bit as well.
Yeah, I thought maybe if I say a few more of the things that are in the list, and then we can move along. So we also thought about we talked a little about abandoning your needs and just becoming us getting in an awareness that that's what we've been doing. Just the fact that the recognition and realizing that we're not having the same experience is a part, I think, of need missing, and that if you're not having the same experience, then your needs would be different, or you would respond differently in that situation. So there just ends up a sort of miscommunication or a misawareness in a way. I think expectations of yourself and others is a part of something that's going on. Also that needs and expectations get bigger, I think, the more they aren't met. So I think that's going on. Maybe not having language for all of this, not being able to talk about it. What else we got here? Talked about over accommodating fatigue. I think these are all things that all of this was going on, and I think for us to understand and know more of this was really helpful for us when we were thinking about our own beliefs and what we believed about staying or leaving, or what was going on, I suppose.
Definitely. And that's something that I really try and install on my children, really, to help them understand that people don't have the same experiences of things, and so people's truths are their truths, their experiences are their truth. So this kind of, it's a tricky area, isn't it, to help young people to understand, and all people to understand that there are many truths in situations. Sometimes there isn't one right and one wrong that's going on. So I think that's a really important one for people to realize, that particularly from a sensory point of view, what can look like fussy or being a bit needy kind of behavior, it is a really huge need that has to be met for them to be able to have any capacity to meet anyone else's needs. So really important. So I think hopefully our listeners can sort of gather that unpicking all of these things and changing our relationship with these narratives can start opening up whole new possibilities for what's really going on in our relationships, and we're gonna unpick a lot more of that in our next episode, aren't we? Because otherwise I think we could just make this one way too long. So and we'll come back. We're definitely going to come back, and we're going to cover some examples and share some stories from our own journeys and others. But for now, let's just really clarify and kind of try and summarize the sort of the new truth that we have discovered along our way when we've been doing a lot of this work to recover. Now, I think it's really important to let our listeners know that in neither case was it that we both went to some kind of couples counselling and sat down together and worked through this stuff. No. My partner didn't have any capacity for that, and to be honest, he didn't really probably have the interest in it. Whereas I did actually. So actually, I find all of this stuff quite fascinating. You know, I'm really interested in people and what we call emotional archaeology. What's started kind of some of our behavioural patterns and our thinking. So it's actually quite interesting stuff for us, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we love it. So we've been merrily doing this work on our own, and what we've found is that as we've changed, the relationships have changed in our homes. It just has a knock-on effect. If you're not the same person, then things will change. And so there's so much there's a wider and healthier perspective, isn't there?
Yes.
So to be looking at relationships and how we meet our needs inside them and beyond them. So, and this is actually really empowering and liberating. We do get people going, well, why do I have to do all the work?
No.
That's not fair, is it? You know, I'm already meeting loads of needs. I'm doing this, and this, and now I've got to do more work. But actually, it really is empowering and liberating to discover how your needs can be met in all different kinds of ways, rather than subscribing to this cultural narrative and myth that your partner should be your everything.
Yeah.
This isn't giving up the idea that your relationship can or will meet the needs you have. It just releases yourself and your loved ones to meet those needs differently than these narratives would have us believe, when there are lots and lots of other contributing factors.
Yeah. And when we reduce our demands and expectations on others, they have a chance to recover themselves too, understand their needs better, have more capacity, and surprise us, which is what we've experienced. That we were not expecting this, Heather. We were just like, well, we need to be better. Something needs to be better for us. So we cracked on with that work. I was not expecting anything else beyond that. So it was a surprise. They may have more capacity, capability, and interest to meet our needs than we've ever believed. This has been our experience, and several areas where we told we were told our partners could never do what we needed. It hasn't turned out like that. So we've also both discovered edges. We've discovered edges where we can't meet our partner's needs, or they can't meet our needs, and we've navigated that too. So I think it's, you know, that's the other input. It's not that suddenly we found the one magic wand and all the needs are being met. It's not that. We've also gone to, you know, very challenging edges in our relationship, navigated those, got more comfortable to be there and understand what's going to happen if on any particular need it can or can't be met.
Yeah, so nowadays when it comes to meeting needs, we believe and live something that sounds a bit like this. So it's my needs are my responsibility. My partner's needs are their responsibility. I will meet my partner's needs to the level of my own capacity, capability, and interest to do that. I'll allow my partner to meet my needs to the level of their capacity, capability, and interest. So beyond that, it's my responsibility to meet my needs in a range of different ways and with different people. I meet my partner's needs that I can from a giving and loving and unconditional place, when I've taken responsibility for my needs first.
Yeah. And also, I want what's best for me and what's best for them. And I'll work on knowing what's best for me, and I'll not assume I know what's best for them. That was a big one. I'll support and meet my partner's needs, values, and aspirations to the level I can without betraying myself and my needs, values, and aspirations. And I'm okay with my partner supporting my needs, values, and aspirations to the level they can without betraying themselves and their needs, values, and aspirations. And where there are gaps and needs that are unable to be met by me or them, I'm committed to exploring those with compassion and curiosity. And it may also take me to a relationship edge. This is a relationship with yourself and your loved ones that we're inviting you to discover. It's a different truth. It's a really very different truth, I think. And it's a different way than we were told and encouraged into from our earliest age as people, as human beings, when we've discovered how different we are in our relationship and family, and how unhealthy actually our relationship dynamics have become. It takes time. The myth and the narratives that created it go deep. But change absolutely is possible though. And we're here to support you every step by step of the way with that journey.
If this episode has resonated with you, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching to get notifications of future episodes. To dive deeper into all of this with professional coaching, resources, and all the support you need, join us in Loving Difference via www.lovingdifference.net. And we'll be back here soon.